So there are a number of resources that board members individually or collectively can seek out to just gain more knowledge on, not only their roles, but how or what some best practices might be for their whole board and for them individually on their nonprofit board, how they can behave, how they can operate. So a number of these sources are, websites, but particular websites. There's things like Board Source. Let me just get my cheat sheet out. The National Council of Nonprofits, that's one. And then your own state, whatever state you're in, your particular state's nonprofit association. So they have websites as well. And then you have your normal sources, your small business associations, national, and your state's small business association's website, and then the IRS's website, right? So all of those sources you can use to gain some insight, gain some knowledge in how you might want to perform a little bit better, how you may be able to integrate a few best practices that you might not necessarily be aware of. These sites will help you. But knowing how to navigate through those sites, that's the key. And that comes with training. I mean, there's a lot of, not a lot of training, but there's certain things that you might want to gravitate towards as far as understanding, how and what do I need to gain knowledge in? How do I gain knowledge in, my particular role? What is the characteristics, the qualifications of my role? What are the needs of an individual, a secretary, a chairperson, a vice chair, the treasurer? What are their, or just a general board member? Like, what are my roles? How do I perform them? How do I perform them better? So understanding that, and you can look at the different sessions that we've done, but you can gain some insight into what that is, what that looks like, what different pots of information do I need to start to uncover to gain more insight and to gain more understanding in my role. Now, if we go, like for me, myself, if I was to want to understand, one of the things that is always a pressure for me is how many board members do you need? What's too few? What's too many? What's just right? And what determines that? So one of the things that I'm curious about when I first started operating in the capacity of a board member on boards is, what does a board look like? How many participants are on a board? What are their functions? So my query would be the role of the board, and then the different individuals or the different members that make up a nonprofit board. So those would be my inquiries. So where would I go for that? I would go to these different sites that I just mentioned to understand, okay, and all of them have, complementary literature, but they all have their own individual specific information and resources that you can gain insight into those roles. So that leads me to, okay, so I know that there is a secretary, I know that there is a treasurer, I know that there is a vice chair, there's a chair, or in some cases they're called vice presidents and presidents, right? And I think that's secretary, treasurer, vice chair, and chair. But then you have other members. What do they do? They're not titled, they're just board members. So what do other board members do? That might be another query. I can go to these different resources and look up those, that information. How might me as just a general board member behave? What's my function? How can I support the others? What does that look like, right? So I can understand that. Some other bits of information is we talked a lot about, the financial resources and understanding that we need to have as board members, not necessarily being accountants or tax attorneys, but being aware of the financial activity and what we need to be looking out for. Why is that important? That's important because we're overseeing. How do you oversee an organization that's a nonprofit. You have to look at its activity. Well, what's that look like? What's the activity? Do I go out and, if they're a nonprofit that deals in agriculture, cattle, things of that nature, do I go out to the farms and, put my boots on and roll my sleeves up and just, not necessarily. What you need to understand and what you need to know about is how to read data. And the main data sets that we typically review as board members is financial data, right? So how do I interpret that financial data? No, I'm not an accountant. No, I'm not a tax attorney. No, I'm not, skilled at these different things when it comes to analytical and quantitative analysis, but I still need to understand certain things. What do I need to understand, and how can I, make sure that my antennas go up when it's in front of me? You can go to these resources. They'll let you know, hey, you need to be aware of this. You need to be aware of that. Now, the main resource for that now is your IRS, right? Your IRS will give you an example, an illustration of a 990, a short 990, as we covered this in previous sessions, 990 EZ, and a full-blown, full-fledged 990, right? That's just a regular 990. So we can go on those forms, kind of just peruse through them and see the different sections of the forms, what's asked of the individual or the entity that's filling out that form, and then we can maybe go to the instructions, because each one of those forms has an instructional manual. So if there's a line that it says, let's say it says fundraising, like, oh, I do that, I do fundraising. I wonder what they consider fundraising. I wonder what the IRS considers fundraising. We need to be in line with them, right? So it just says fundraising on the line of the 990, but I can go to the instructions, and the instruction has like a mini paragraph on what they consider fundraising, right? So that's like, okay, cool, that's fundraising. And then program revenue. What's program revenue? I don't understand that. And I know that's one of the things, me as a board, when I review the data, I need to be reviewing if we're a nonprofit that has several programs, well, what does that mean? What is a program? How do I see the performance of a program? What is a program? I can go to my literature in the IRS, look at that line item programs, and then go to the instructional manual, and the instructional manual will give me a mini paragraph for what a program is, what the IRS considers that as a program. So again, a way to use the information to gain insight into the nonprofit. We talked a lot about to the day that we're living in, social media, how to navigate that world, right? From a business perspective, I understand, and I don't understand, because I'm Fred Flint, so I don't personally understand, but my nieces and nephews understand from an individual standpoint how to navigate the world of Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and all of this other kind of jazz, right? But I don't, and we may not from an individual standpoint, but can we understand it from a broader business standpoint? What resources can we reach out to gain insight into how businesses, especially nonprofit-centric businesses, should engage that medium of marketing, that medium of management of, we talked about this, PR management, through those, because that's where it's managed. It's managed through social media these days, right? Like, so if somebody does something, the world hears about it, and it's like a running, like I said, I don't have it, so I don't know what it looks like, but I'm assuming that it's like a running log of just comments and questions with the picture, or somebody said something, or video or whatever, or a meme or something like that, and you have this running log of this chat going on concerning it. Well, that's part of it, right? So how do I do that as a business, though? The SBA's website will help us with that. Some of your states, nonprofit associations might be, hip on some of that stuff. And then the different nonprofit sites might not themselves be aware of how to engage that world, but they have resources that they can point you to. They have sites that they can point you to engage that world. So again, how do I navigate these different sites to understand more how I, as an individual and as a collective board, can perform better for not only the collective membership, but for the nonprofit itself, right? That's the ultimate goal. How do we make this nonprofit that we believe so much in thrive and be successful not only in today, but for tomorrow as well. So this is how we navigate these sites. I'm trying to just flush out a few other things that we can use the sites for. And one of the things that we can use it for is the reestablishment of our mission, our vision, the protocols, the best practices. You can get that from the SBA. You know, if there's things that you need to, you know, redo, there's some things you need to look at your bylaws. Like, what's the problem? What's the process? Oh, we don't have a process. Well, what would be a process? How do we develop that process? They can guide you down those pathways where you can start to develop a practice in your own board collective that you integrate every year, you know, every 6 months, every 2 years, whatever, that becomes a part of the internal performance of the board as a whole, but also as a benefit to the nonprofit because you're improving certain aspects of yourself, right? We talked about the reviews. Like, how often should we review? What should the review be on? How do we engage and understand what should a review be? We can go to these sites and look for that information and be pointed to resources. Now, one of the things about this site, again, I've kind of joked about myself a long time about this, to you all about myself concerning, you know, my disposition. So to all of my, I guess my 70s and 80s and even 60s babies out there, you know what the Fred Flintstone is. You know who that is, and the Jetsons. You know those cartoons. So to you all, like, I'm a Fred Flintstone type of a guy. So a lot of things that I like are tangible, right? I'm not really. I go to, you know, we have websites, and it is what it is. But for you all who are like me, you're more Fred Flintstone centric. You can still go to these sites and get that Fred Flintstone feel. You can go to the sites and you can order books and documents and information that you can get mailed to you and you can read, right? You can go to, you know, the different sites, IRS, and maybe not have information mailed to you, but you can download a PDF file and have it on your, you know, they used to have these things back in the, I'm not sure if they may, I haven't seen them lately. So we have the iPads and all that kind of stuff, and the phones or whatever. But they used to have what is that reader called? Is it the reader? Okay, so the Kindle. So we had the Kindle. So the Kindle, you know, you can do the virtual thing. But now, you know, you have your iPads and stuff like that. But some of you all like that document. So you can download the PDF and you can scroll through it. It's just like having a booklet or whatever. But what I'm telling you is nobody is handicapped when it comes to gaining insight and information and understanding into how to better do their job as a board member, and not saying that in a derogatory way. Why is it so important that we do our job and do it to the best of our ability? Because we all want and look for the ultimate success and development of our nonprofits that we serve, right? So how can we do our job better so that our nonprofit is positively impacted? You know, we gain information, we gain insight into things we don't know. And where do we get that information? We have a plethora of resources that we've talked about in various sessions, but we also have this one resource that we can personally carve out a bit of our time, a day, in a week, in a month, and just do our own personal perusing through these different areas, you know. And there's some junk sites now, don't get me wrong. I called out the names of ones that are common and that typically have really, you know, good information resource-wise on them, right? But they're not, now, don't get me wrong, the only one that you can rest your hat on somewhat as far as standards pronouncements, principles is the IRS, because you're getting, that's what the law is for this year. You got to file that way, you got to do that. So you're getting what it is in this nation with the IRS. SBA, yes. The Small Business Association, yes. But not to the extent of the IRS, right? So both of those are federal programs, right? So you can rely on them somewhat. Now the other sites, they're nonprofits. They're sites for the empowerment of boards of nonprofits. So they're there for our benefit. So we need to use them to that end. And that's why it's important that you all know what your resources are, know where they are, know how to seek them out, because you might not want to wait for training. You might want to beef up your skills and whatever, so that when you go to training, you're able to contribute in a way that others might not have known you were interested in contributing, you know, and you would help develop the board as a whole with how much more understanding that you have, because you took the time and you sought out just different things that you wanted to know. Like you just want, you sat in on a board meeting and they mentioned 2 or 3 things, you didn't understand it, so you went and you did your own research, and this is what this is research. And in research, you need to keep reference, you know, have a reference. Like if something, and especially if there's something that's said or you heard and you don't necessarily know if it's the right way or if it's true, you need to do your research. And you need to check the sources. So even when I go to the nonprofit's website, just to let everyone know, and I see a number, I'm going to if it's like a stat or something, I'm going to check it against something like the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. I'm going to check the stat to make sure that it's okay. So I don't just use things blindly. You have to have a mind to, if it's data you're trying to get to, you have to have a mind to say, you know what, let me verify. Let me trust, but let me verify. I'm intentionally want to engage this world to enhance my ability as a board member so that I can enhance my board collective. So I'm doing my investigation, I'm seeking out things, I'm finding out things, but then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna check my sources, right? And the cool thing about these sites is they typically give you where their sources are. The sites themselves are not brainiac nonprofit board member, doctoral precedent, sites. They're just sites that collect information from different people, entities in the field whose passion, whose discipline, whose disposition surrounds that area. That area might be treasurer's roles, that area might be secretary's roles, that area might be the structure of a board, that area might be the participation of, it might be a number of things, but they give you those sources so you can just trace back, okay, where did this information come from? Okay, Johnny Smith from Landover, Tuscaloosa, that has no degrees, experience, or nothing, and that might not be a good source, right? But if it's from Lana Channing from the USDA, who's had years of experience sitting on the Houses and Wages Committee concerning nonprofit earmarking done every year, then maybe, yeah, that's a good resource to kind of hang our hat on as far as the information that she's providing to these nonprofits. So you always want to be smart about the information. I mean, and that's anything. Like, that's not just with nonprofits, because of the world we're living in. It's a virtual world. It's an online world. It's a screen world, but you get both quality and garbage at the same time. So you have to be aware, and you have to know how to not only look and gain the information that you need, but verify. Don't just, okay, I saw it here and it is what it is. No, I saw it here. It's a little bit more weighty. So that's the other thing. How weighty is the information that you're gaining? Is it just simply, how should we call the board to meeting? How should we do that? Do we have the secretary do it? Does the president do it? Is it like a javelin? And what happens? That's not too much. We can just figure that out. Personal preference. Get the president a javelin, just have her or him pound it down when it's time to come to order or whatever. But something that's more weighty, like what are the things that would disqualify a nonprofit from being a nonprofit? What are those things outside of just financial activity? How do we understand that? Yeah, we need to make sure, because that's weighty information, we need to make sure that if we're looking at these sites and we see, oh, they say this, this, and this, are we sure that's all? Are we sure that is just what it is, or is it something else? And what would induce an organization of touching that area and risking losing their status? That's weighty information, so we need to check our sources for that information. So those are just, I think I went deeper than I wanted to, but I think those are both methods, how to approach different outside resources to gain an understanding and insight into how to do our jobs as board members better and collectively as the full board, but also how to use and qualify all of this information that we're getting from whatever source. How can we, qualify that, and how can we identify the good from the bad, the fish from the bone? How do we navigate that? So that's what this session was, and hopefully that was helpful to you all. That's it. Yeah.